We're on the campaign trail in Lincoln, spending some time now with Mike Foley, who is a candidate for the Republican nomination for Governor of Nebraska. Of course, Mike currently serves as the Nebraska State Auditor. Well, Mike, let's talk about it. We're just a few weeks away. Give us an update on how things are going with the campaign.
Well, it's a very interesting race. You know, it's a crowded field. We got 6 Republicans vying for the Republican nomination for governor. And at the same time, in the same election cycle, we've got 4 or 5 Republicans vying for the nomination for U.S. Senate. And the voters are just now starting to kind of figure this all out with their scorecards and figure out who's running for what. It took a while to get there. I think it's the first time in many decades where we've had both open seats, governor's office and U.S. Senate, at the same time. So anyway, it's an interesting, fascinating process. We've had the second debate now, 1 more to go. And we're less than 3 weeks to voting day. Some people, of course, have already started to vote. The early voting started a week or two ago, and some people have already cast their ballots, but most of the ballots will be cast on May 13th, the primary election day.
And folks are aware you were a state senator, but then, of course, in the statewide election 4 years ago, was elected a state auditor. So how has that helped, or how has that perception been as you've been traveling the state?
Yeah, it's very valuable. You know, we've never had a governor who previously served as state auditor. And in addition to being the state auditor for 2 terms, 8 years total, I also served in the unicameral legislature for 6 years, and including some service on the Appropriations Committee. None of the candidates in this race have ever served in the Appropriations Committee. That's a key committee assignment. That's the committee that writes the state budget. $10 billion of expenditures every year. It's very important to get those priorities right. So I've got familiarity with the state budgeting process, and I've dug deep as a state auditor. I have held people accountable for how they spend our money. And even when they don't want to be held accountable, and we found lots of problems, particularly at our Health and Human Services Department, which is an agency that, in my view, needs to be rebuilt from scratch. It's a third of our state government, $3.4 billion a year at HHS, 5,600 employees, and every time our auditors go in there, we find more and more difficulties and problems. And if we can tighten up that agency and others, but if we can tighten up state government operations, we create room in the budget for a permanent and sustained tax relief package that I think would result in a lot of benefits to people of Nebraska.
Let's talk about that. That seems to be one of the big topics in the unicameral, that things maybe didn't get done as much as they wanted. As a Mike Foley administration, how would you lead to get more, I'm assuming, more tax relief, especially in that property tax area?
Yes, absolutely. You know, from coast to coast in Nebraska, we're hearing property tax, property tax, property tax. And it's ironic because, of course, the state doesn't levy a property tax. It's all levied by local government. But the voters are saying, I don't care who levies it, fix it, because it's way too high. Ag land valuations, what were they up? 29% this past year, 20-some% the prior year. This is really putting a pinch into our farmers. And the ag sector is the backbone of Nebraska's economy. When the farmers and ranchers do well, the rest of us benefit to boot. So we've got to protect the ag sector. That's the Cadillac industry of our state. That is the backbone of our state. We've got to look out for the ag sector. And they're getting hurt by these high property valuations. We've got to put some pressure on local government, particularly the school boards. Say, look, guys, the valuations went up. Now, it's legal for you to lower the levy. You don't have to keep the same levy. And remind folks of that. But in addition, what can we do at the state level? Well, we got a couple of tools in our toolbox. One is the valuation of ag land from 75% currently, could push that down to 65%. That's a bill in the legislature didn't quite get there this year. I'm hoping, I would anticipate that that bill will come back next year. We've got to get that one done. The other thing is we've got a property tax credit program. Again, the legislature put some money into that program to ramp it up a little bit, but we need to do a whole lot more to give people some relief from these high property taxes. The voters want results, and they don't want a mealy-mouthed answer like, well, we didn't do it, it's those other guys. They just want results, and they're turning to the governor's office and say, we want this fixed. And I will take up that issue when I become the next governor of Nebraska.
The other big issue is water, and we see continuing issues on who's going to pay, how it's going to be distributed. We know the folks in the Southwest still having major issues with either allocation, and some feel they're being unfairly taxed. So what kind of leadership would you bring in dealing with the water situation, as far as to make it, if it can be fair and equitable, not only to rural and production agriculture concerns, but also those in Lincoln, Omaha, and the metro areas?
Yeah, great question. You know, Nebraska, I think, can be very proud of the fact that we've got over 9 million acres of irrigated farm ground. We're #1 in the country in terms of irrigated farm ground. And we've got in most parts of our state, we've got the water to feed those pumps. We've got 110,000 registered wells in Nebraska feeding those pumps to those center pivot systems. And we've got a $1 billion center pivot industry. And 4 major companies that are exporting center pivot systems around the globe, literally. And I've gone out and talked to the chief executives of some of those center pivot companies, guys like Chris Roth at Rinke and Dave Tomes out at T&L Irrigation. These guys really know water backwards and forwards. And what they're telling me is these center pivot systems are now so much more efficient than the old systems that they were selling just a few years ago. That's going to result in a lot of benefits to Nebraska. We've got the water, we've got the aquifer here, we've got to protect that, obviously. And in most parts of the states, we're in good shape. Now, you're right. In southwest Nebraska, we got some problems. We got some dry areas. I went down and visited with Craig and Bessie Hawksmeyer. They've got a farm not too far from the Republican River, and I've stood on the banks of the Republican River, not much river there. Stood on the dam of the Harlan County Reservoir, not a whole lot of water there. So we're tangled up in this Kansas compact that's caused us so many difficulties, and it really is pinching a lot of farmers in certain corners of the state. And we've got to look out for those farmers because they're under tight water restrictions, yet a mile or two away, the farmers can use water plentifully. So we've got to have some equity here and make sure that this burden, this difficulty is not falling on just a handful of farmers. And I want to look out for those folks.
As you said, there are a number of candidates vying for the Republican nomination to run in the fall and to be the next governor come January. Talk about maybe what differentiates you from the other candidates. I mean, there's a number of issues we can talk about, but let's maybe focus on what you see putting you at difference than the other ones.
Yeah, you know, after I got in this race, I went out to Husker Harvest Days and met a gentleman, and he said, okay, so what are you all about? And I went through, you know, lower government, lower expenses, lower taxes, fiscal conservatism, social conservatism, and so forth. He goes, yeah, I know, you guys are all saying the same thing. So what makes you, Mike Foley, different? What's different here is experience and track record. I'm the only candidate in this race who served 8 years as a state auditor. When you're the auditor, you really dig deep into state government operations. You know that state government budget backwards and forwards. You know where the misspending is. You know where the problems are, and you can hone in and fix those problems. I don't have to climb the learning curve when I become the governor of Nebraska. I've already been up that learning curve. State government is a $10 billion enterprise. Lots of complexity, lots of moving parts. And I've served in the Appropriations Committee, the legislature. I've served 8 years as state auditor. The experiential factor, the track record that I can point to of bills that I carried in the legislature, of actions that I've taken as state auditor, really do differentiate me from the other candidates. Again, we've never had a governor who previously had this kind of experience, the experience of being the state auditor for 2 terms. That's enormously valuable to the state, and I'm going to take that experience forward, and I think I can do a wonderful job for the people of Nebraska as their next governor. I would be so honored to have their vote and serve them as their next governor.
All right, Mike, again, now before we let you go, I want to touch on another issue that's important to all Nebraskans, and that is education. Yeah. As we talk about what's going on in the unicameral, we talk about the funding. And I guess, how do you view education? Are we looking rural versus urban? Because I think if you go kind of west of Lincoln, they're thinking, well, Lincoln and Omaha gets an awful lot of money, not much is staying around, you know, locally, and there's some disproportionate. Is there a way that the school funding formula can be fixed so we continue to have viable rural schools?
Yeah, and you've hit on a very key issue. That school aid formula, which divvies up $1 billion across 250 local public school districts, is an atrocity. There's a professor at the university who took the school aid formula, which is written into our statute books, and he expressed it as an algebraic equation. It ran 99 pages. I don't think there are 3 people left in the state who even understand that formula. We've got to start over and rewrite that formula and make sure that that $1 billion is being divvied up properly. And this does tie into that property tax question, because a lot of those school districts, because of ag land valuations, are not getting anything out of the school aid formula. We've put in too much reliance on the local property taxpayer to support our schools. That's not fair. We've got to divvy up the school aid in a more proportionate manner so that all of our schools, east and west, are sharing in the proceeds of the state aid formula and receiving revenue for their schools, and stop putting all this pressure on local property taxes. It used to be a good balance between property tax and school aid, but we pushed it over the years more and more onto the backs of the property taxpayers, and that's not fair. It's not good for the farm. It's not good for our ag sector, and that is something that I want to fix. Another dimension of that school aid formula is, one of the factors in the school aid formula is what's called the poverty factor. The more impoverished students you have in your school district, the more money you get. And we've chosen the world's worst measure of poverty to divvy up that money. We've chosen enrollment in the federal school lunch program as our measure of poverty. That's not an accurate measure of poverty. And some of the larger school districts are gerrymandering this formula, signing all these kids up improperly for the school lunch program. And I'm not trying to take lunches away from hungry kids, but they're improperly signing these kids up for that school lunch program who are not eligible. And it throws off the whole school aid formula, and the school districts who play by the rules are getting cheated. I want to fix that.
All right, Mike, if folks want to find out more about your campaign, follow along, how can they do that?
Yeah, and I hope they do. I hope because they jump on board. We've got a strong grassroots campaign going. Lots of people all across the state are enthused about this candidacy and want to help us. And they can do that by going to my website, MikeFoleyForGovernor.com. They can also find us on Facebook, Mike Foley for Governor. And I hope they'll sign on to our campaign, like us on Facebook, find us there, Facebook or the Internet. And there's a way to donate and a way to volunteer for the campaign. Put some signs up for us, and I'd be so grateful to have them join the Foley team, and let's take the Nebraska to the next level.
All right. Mike Foley, who is the Nebraska State Auditor and is a candidate for the Republican nomination for governor for the state of Nebraska. You can find out more also at agview.net on the politics page. In Lincoln for AgView, I'm Ken Rahjes.